Welcome back to the Frequency Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Marie, and I'm joined with my other host, Q. Q, how you doing today? What's going on?
Man, it's feeling good. It's the start of March, so you know that means a lot of basketball, and the Aries energy is in the air, y'all. Let's get it going.
And we're also joined here with our special guest, Miss Precious from Precious Truthz Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm with you with the basketball. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And
oh, wait, so the Aries energy, you don't like the Aries energy coming?
it's whatever.
Okay.
I'm a Taurus, so May is coming real soon. That's what we're gonna go for.
My sister is a Taurus. I like Tauruses. That's what's up.
Taurus, I got one of my friends is a Taurus. Shout out to her. You know what I'm saying?
I definitely want to go ahead and jump in. And I want to jump in. One of the things that I loved about your podcast was that your bio was like, oh my gosh, I love this bio. Me and my fiance were so big into like, okay, what's not the truth? They tell us one thing, it's really something else. And I love the fact that you said that, you know, society made me believe certain things and I had to unlearn those things. So I want to kind of jump in on how you started. Like, what made you say, okay, well, I'm going to make a podcast about this. Okay, this is something I need to unlearn. What brought you to the point where like, this isn't right? I don't believe what they're telling me. What brought you to that
Right. So this is actually my second podcast. My first podcast was called Pretty Truthz. Truthz is me. And when I created that, it was with my best friend. She has a different background. She's Black, but she's mixed with a whole bunch of other things. Okay. And when we started that podcast, I really wanted to discuss just the different perception we both receive just from her being a lighter shade, how I see people see her. And unfortunately, the pandemic washed us out because she worked in a hospital. And so we didn't have the time to record. It was just too crazy. And I also, even back then, I wanted to do my own thing with being able to talk about my truths. I felt like, although we're both Black, we don't have the same experiences. And I knew that my experience was something relatable to a lot of people, a lot of Black women who look like me. So I'm like, I'm going to start my own podcast. I'm going to call it Precious Truthz because the way I got my name was me learning to live by my truths. So when I really sat and thought about what is it that I want to do with this podcast and talking about my truths, that was the first thing that came up, just talking about my personal experiences and how I unlearned the things that society taught me. Unfortunately, I used to think I was not beautiful due to my dark skin, due to being Black. And that's for looking at magazines, looking at TV, looking at who has the star role as a woman in TV. It's always the lighter skinned woman. It's always or a white woman. And I just did not feel beautiful. And fortunately, when I went to college and I took African-American history, and I started to really take in how we learned colorism, how it's been divisive, how we've been taught these things about ourselves. That's when I had an eye opener. And I was like, I think that's what I'm going to do on my podcast. So every single episode, I try to put something in there that really just talk to my Black folks and tell them, listen, you got to unlearn. You got to unlearn.
Do you think that was your...
Getting real Black in here today, y'all. Getting real Black.
Yes, we getting real Black in here, okay? Black health, Black wealth, Black ownership.
Okay.
I love it.
I love that. Black health, Black wealth. I know that's right. I talk about colorism sometimes, and you know, like my family is like a rainbow of shades, you know.
Yes.
So my fiance is biracial, and then my daughter, she's half Hispanic, half Black. So there's a multitude of shades going on around here. So, but I do know as a chocolate woman, I like to say, you know, as a chocolate woman, there is a lot more stipulation on colorism. And I want to say, like, do you feel like that's in every culture? Or do you feel like we only kind of receive, because that's a big one. We only kind of receive colorism from our other Black brothers and sisters, I guess you can say.
Well, I know colorism was created to be divisive between us. Okay, because when it comes from white people, it's racism, it's bias, it's prejudice. But colorism was created for us to be divisive among each other. And I don't think it's just in our culture. You see it in India, you see it in Asia, you see it in these other countries, the same thing. Even when you look at Miss, well, they're trying to get better now, but when you look at Miss Universe, Miss whoever their country is, it's a lighter shade. And when you actually look at the majority of people from these countries, they're darker shades. So it's not just us, but unfortunately, we can only speak from our own experiences here in America. So colorism does happen a lot in our communities. I was in this clubhouse room a few weeks ago, and it was called Light-Skinned Women Are Just as Black as Dark-Skinned Women. And so a range of women were in that room, and we were trying to figure out, like, why did you create this room? What are you trying to say?
Right.
And the lighter skinned women were saying, you know, they feel like darker skinned women take away their experiences when they say that they have privilege, which you do have privilege as a lighter skinned woman. And although you don't see it, it still exists because, you know, if I go to an interview and a lighter shade Black person goes to an interview, that person can make a decision based on their complexion, but they're not going to tell you that they hired you because of that.
Right,
so, you know, you do have privilege, and just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And so, you know, and we argued through that room. And so I do see that the divisiveness is between us, and we have to learn to, you know, fix it.
I would love to have been in that room. I'm really mad that I missed that room. I would have loved to have been in that room.
I mean, I liked it, but it was a lot of back and forth in there. And it just makes you think, again, that it was created for it to be divisive. And 400 years later, we're still arguing with each other about complexions. And I get both sides, because the young lady who was lighter skinned was saying, I feel like you're saying I don't have Black experiences. It's like, no, nobody's saying you don't have Black experiences, because you still probably receive prejudices because you're Black. It's just that I have a different experience as a darker skinned woman, you know, growing up being told I'm pretty for a dark skinned girl. Why can't I just be pretty? They're not saying you pretty for a light skinned girl. You understand? So it's different experiences I went through. I remember having people my shade say things like, oh, when I get older, I'm going to marry a light skinned person, or I'm going to marry a white person because I want my kids to be mixed so they don't go through the same thing I did with my complexion. So it's like nobody's taking away your Black experience, but we're saying that you have a certain privilege that we don't.
I watched something, and it was the study of melanin, and this guy, I think his name is like Dr. Africa or something like that, Layla Africa, and he was talking about the study of melanin, and he was also putting in there the same thing about colorism and how they wanted to divide us. But just because you're a lighter skin or a darker skin, it doesn't mean the darker skin person has more melanin than the lighter skin person. And so he was just trying to merge that gap into making Black people understand that we are still the same, and society is the one that has placed these, oh, well, you're above them because you're lighter, you know, and it's not necessarily genetically that you are, or something genetically that you're superior, or some reason why you need to be superior. It's just because you're closer to a European skin tone, you know? So I think that is a heavy topic, you know, like I never was big on colorism. That is you just came right in there. You was like, let's talk about colorism. So that's a heavy one. I never really like, I did experience like, oh, you know, like, oh, well, you're pretty for dark skin, or you're dark. And then some people will say, you're not that dark. And it's like, well, okay, well, now y'all trying to make me feel like I don't know where I go, you know, so I just say chocolate, you know.
I mean, you like chocolate. Brown.
Yeah, you know, just, you know, whatever, you know, but my mom is dark skinned. My dad is dark skinned. My sister is dark skinned. You know, I'm probably one of the lightest one out of my immediate family, but, you know, I never suffered through that. I kind of suffered more so with my hair and trying to wanting my hair to like flow, like, you know, just like, I never had that. That was my other than colorism. But what you was going to say, Q?
I was just thinking of when you guys were talking about the whole colorism, it is very, very like prevalent in today's society still. Like you see in like the 90s and late 2000s, early 2000s with music videos, you will always get the exotic woman or the light-skinned woman. You would never get the dark-skinned woman like the Takaras that were on America's Next Top Model, or
Right.
if that's what it was. You don't get those women like that. And there's a lot of beautiful women out there, just period, no matter the shade or anything like that. But you definitely see how society gives the hand to the lighter complected people. That person who is lighter complected may be a little bit more a safer pick or a safer choice in whatever the situation is. And that's just not the case. And it's really sad that, you know, we still have like women, especially women or men, have to deal with it today, but you definitely see it more so with the women for that, because I can definitely say that I don't want to sound rude when I say this, but I've always said, like, okay, is she cute just because she's light skinned? You know what I'm saying? Like those type of things, like I really you don't really think about it as colorism sometimes, but you know, that I guess that is a form of colorism that I'm actually doing by saying that. But I feel like but then again, I feel like there's some truth to that, but hey, you know, I'm going to digress on that, but hey, I mean, I'm an equal. I'm always an equal opportunist on the spectrum of melanin. So,
unless they short, that's the only time you start to discriminate.
Yeah, I can't.
What's wrong with short girls? I'm 5'2".
Right, try to tell them. Right.
I can't see that. It's just a preference. It's just a preference.
We always talking about you like to climb trees a little bit, so you know it's okay. It's okay. I do want to ask you a question though. What is the biggest truth that you felt like you unlearned? Was that colorism, or do you feel like there has been another truth that was like earth-shattering, like I need to unlearn this?
I think it's all entwined in one. It's the fact that we allow, and it's not just Black, our society to teach us to think a certain way about ourselves. Like, that is what I had to unlearn. Like, looking in the mirror, even if you've listened to multiple podcasts, I switch my outro a lot, but my outro says, I remember looking in the mirror thinking it's not fair, questioning this dark skin and this kinky hair, letting other people tell me pretty wasn't there, but I knew it wasn't true, so I stood and stared. Because when I looked in the mirror, I saw pretty, I saw beautiful, I saw all these things.
Hard.
And I allowed what society deemed as the standard of beauty to change how I felt about myself. And so that was the biggest truth, learning to say, you know, what you see is truth. What you feel about yourself is your truth. And if you look in the mirror and you feel good about your appearance, it doesn't matter what the standard of beauty says. And although, you know, everybody has preferences, and unfortunately some of these preferences is due again to what society has deemed as beautiful. However, if I'm not that person's preference, then I'm not their preference. I'm not gonna, you know, argue with a person and say you should like dark-skinned women and you should. If I'm not for you, I'm not for you, and I'm gonna find a person. Well, I mean, I am in a relationship, but you know, that's how I was thinking when I first switched it. I'm gonna find somebody who's for me, and that's that. So I think that was my biggest truth, just learning that, you know, what I think about me is the most important and everything else is just a bonus.
I just think it's just so important that we, you know, we pour into ourselves. I think a lot of times that we have the power to kind of speak life or death over ourselves. I say this all the time. And I think that the words we say, even if it is something, even like what Q was just saying, like, is she just cute for a light-skinned girl? Sometimes the words hold more weight than what we think that they do. And so when we're in the mirror and we're like, man, my hair is like, oh, you know, instead of saying something like that, just like, you know what? We just gonna roll with it, you know, just like speak life over it versus, you know, condemning it and being like, oh, my hair's too short, or I'm too, you know, I'm overweight, you know, speak more life. Like, okay, this is my weight. I might want to drop it, but you know, it looks good right now, you know, just in kind of manifesting this whole kind of culture and life over ourselves versus just constantly putting death back into our lives. On your podcast, I know you have guests come on sometimes. What is, I guess have you ever been taught something? Like, are you into like conspiracy theories, or, you know, like, have you ever been taught something from one of your guests? Like, I did not know that is something I'm gonna have to look into and learn about that myself, or unlearn it for myself too as well.
Definitely. Every single episode, when I speak with someone, they're teaching me something. So I love just talking with people, especially that I don't know. Because, you know, of course, you invite people on that you've known and you know that they'll bring something good to the discussion. But every single episode, I learned something, even simple stuff. Like my previous podcast was with a entrepreneur. Her name is Dawn. And her book is called The Bitch Book. And I'm like, the bitch book, and it's basically building your Trojan creative horse. And she's basically talking to other people about entrepreneurship and step one and how to start and everything. But when I was talking to her, I was like, you know, I aspire to be an entrepreneur one day. And she's like, but you are. I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, you created your own podcast, you create your own hours, you create your own schedule, you create your own content, you put out your own stuff. You're your boss, you're an entrepreneur, you're trying different things. Like, and I'm like, I didn't even take that into consideration. Like, you know, especially since I'm not monetized in a sense, you know, I put ads here and there, but just, I think I learned those little details about myself in every episode. Like, oh, I can consider myself that. Or, you know, even with one of my friends, her name is Chris. She comes on like every other episode. And she's a person who stays true to her values and she doesn't just go with the flow of everything else. And I always learn something from her. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Maybe I should address that. Like, I think, yeah, the simplest thing was I have a son. And so unfortunately, I want him to grow up to be a strong Black man, especially in this society. And I used to say certain things like, oh, like he'll fall, get up, don't cry. Men don't cry, you know, stay tough. And she's like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, you know, men need to have emotions. Why can't we say cry? And then when men grow up and they are, you know, emotionally unattached or emotionally immature, it's because this is what we tell them. Men don't cry, suck it up, do these things. I'm like, oh, you're right. And so now I don't even do those things.
She's definitely just hitting the nerve right now because we definitely hold in these emotions. Yeah. Just saying. Sorry.
Q is not. His challenges are being very trying to be more vulnerable with things. I saw another lady put something up about her son and, you know, trying to teach us to unlearn that aspect too. I don't have any sons. I'm a girl mom, but I have nephews whom I love so much. They're like my sons. And I'm always saying stuff like, you know, it's okay to cry. Don't be, you know, but even as a mom of a daughter, I'm always kind of like, you know, it's okay to be sad and upset, but you can't dwell there, you know, like, and sometimes you have to watch that too, because you want them to be able to fully learn how to express themselves versus just kind of cutting off their feelings and saying, well, okay, well, you cried long enough. You got to suck it up now. Just suck it up, you know? So I think that those are things that we do have to unlearn because like Q was just saying, as they get older, you know, you start challenging like, okay, well, why is it hard for me to be vulnerable? Why is it hard for me to convey my emotions or say certain things? It's because you were taught up like, don't you know how to act? You better act like you know how to act when we get you know, so you're always acting, you know, you're like, okay, let me just turn on the acting hat and just start acting versus, okay, well, this really did hurt me. I need to say this. And then you don't want to say it because you're like, okay, well, they're going to think I'm soft, you know, or whatever, you know, men don't cry or whatever it is. So I think that is definitely a truth that needs to be unlearned, you know, because men do cry. Right. I honestly feel like, girl, men cry more than women do.
Please.
Q was like, I don't know about that.
No, because she knows she lying because, you know, I don't want to say, see, I'm about to get chastised out here, but you know, women be having y'all mood swings and y'all just want to just flare out at whatever it is. But we ain't gonna go there, you know. But I do want to ask a question, Miss Precious, though. For someone like myself or anyone else out there, how would you tell them to help find their truth or live by their truth? How do you navigate through that if you're just stuck because you were told one way, not even by society, but maybe by your parents? And it's like, oh, I got to figure out how to, you know, maneuver through my shit. And you tell me, you know, you got this shit behind you. I'm not able to handle that. So how do you help those in our generation or whomever? How do you navigate to find your truth and that push through those old habits that you may have had or picked up from your parents?
Yeah. I remember reading something. Well, I think the number one thing that you need to do is read and research. That's what I say in my bio. In order to be re-educated, in order to start to learn a different process, is to research, to be educated. And that doesn't mean go to school. You can always buy a book. You can, right now, everything is at our fingertips right now with the internet. So I think the first thing is to research and re-educate yourself. The second thing is I remember reading something that said your first thought is not yours. Like when something occurs and that first thought pops into your head, that is not your thought. That is someone else's thought. That is what you have been taught to think. And so it's the second thought that you should go with. And I think that was the first thing. And again, the simplest thing is looking in the mirror and saying, oh, well, I need to be light-skinned to be pretty. That's not me. That's somebody else saying that. And now my second thought is, no, you are pretty and you are beautiful and all these things about yourself. So it's acknowledging that that first thought may not be yours. And what is it that you really truthfully think if this was not taught to you? The third thing I would go with is daily affirmations. I talk to myself in the mirror every single day and I give myself a quote. I don't know if you guys see my little Instagram stories, but that's really me. Whatever comes to mind in the morning, that's me hyping myself up for the day. And just the morning, what you call it, Gots to Be Real came on the radio, Gots to Be Real. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, how you feel, And I'm like, how do I feel in this morning? And that moment, I didn't feel great. I'm like, I don't really want to go to work today. I don't feel well. Like I feel like one of those off days. And then I record it and I'm like, but it's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to acknowledge those feelings. It's okay to think, why do I feel this way? And now that I've identified how I feel, how can I correct it? So I think it's really just about going back into yourself and figuring out, what are your triggers? Why do you feel this way? And now what can you do about it? Because a lot of people acknowledge it. I'm just crazy. Oh, I'm just like that. I got an attitude problem. Okay, that's not normal. So now what are you going to do about that? Are you just going to live with the fact that you have emotional issues, or are you going to address it? So I think those are my three things. Educate yourself, daily affirmations, and actually thinking of that first thought is not your thought at all.
Boy, she just dropping gems.
I know, she just dropped it out right there.
I'm really hoping y'all listening, man. Damn, just hit me with them like.
It took years, and I'm still learning about myself every single day.
I think it's so important that you said daily affirmations. That's the one that I've been working on so much. It's just like constantly speaking life into things. Like your words have so much power, because I think everybody has these different stages, and sometimes it's like, oh, well, you could walk through, well, I'm not pretty. So you learn how to, feel pretty in your own skin, because that's a lie. God wouldn't make us this way if we weren't made in the image of him, and that has to be something, so that has to be beautiful. So I think right now, a lot of people need to understand the power of manifestation and understanding, like, your words have power. They hold weight. You can't just tell your kids, you're not very smart, or whatever you say that's not good, like you can't do that. Or, you have to really speak life over them, because their whole paths can change based on what you say and what you speak over them.
Right.
I love that. What will you tell somebody that is struggling to unlearn something, or feels like they know something, but other people don't believe it, so they're kind of getting a lot of backlash? Did you get a lot of backlash when you first started unlearning these truths?
Yes. The first indication for me was me going natural. So I always permed my hair. I always wanted straight hair flowing down my back. At least I aspired, and I decided to go natural. And that was years ago. And when that first happened, people were like, you're going to go natural? What are you going to do with your hair? Like, no. Is that professional? Will you be able to get a job wearing your natural hair? And it's like, okay, the hair that grows naturally out of my head is not considered natural, is not deemed beautiful. Like I have to put a chemical and chemically change my hair for it to be considered beautiful. Like that was really the thing that was like, no, you really need to think about what's happening with this. And then I met people who wanted to go natural too and just could not see themselves in natural hair. Like they really thought that and it does. We see that all the time. Like when they was that big case about wearing dreadlocks in the workplace, like when they were saying that, you know, a job, the autonomy to tell you cannot wear dreads. Like, so it is some instances where some people might not make that switch, and that's due to how their livelihood affect their ability to get a job. But I really just try to encourage people to live their own truths, because at the end of the day, okay, you're going to work for this job that's not allowing you to be yourself. But what does that do to you on a daily basis on the inside? That inner turmoil where you can't be truthfully yourself every day. So some people will not get there, but I always still just give the information that I can and tell them about my own experience. I think that's my biggest thing, using my experiences to talk to other people and say, listen, I was once there and this is how I got to this point. And either you use it or you don't.
Love it. Love it.
Before we close out, we always like to leave people with a gem. What's something you want to leave somebody with today?
Yes. So I think the one gem I would like to leave people with is to learn to be your authentic self. Learn to be what your authentic self is. And a lot of people don't know what that is, but sometimes you have to play with yourself. Sometimes you really have to spend time in your own thoughts, in your own mental to see who you are. You have to find your voice. You have to amplify that voice. You have to be confident with that voice. And again, if you don't know what your voice sounds like, it's for you to figure out. So I think people just have to learn who they are. I think a lot of times we imitate what we see and we say, oh, the loud person gets the most attention. The funny person gets the most attention, but you're not loud or funny. And that's okay too. And if you always pretend to be someone else and people like you, then they really only like who you're pretending to be. And they don't like who you are authentically. So you really have to learn to be yourself so you can find the people who like you for you. So but that's my gem. So please follow me to your audience members. I need all the follows. So my personal page is Miss Shine Time. That's MZSHYNETYME, because I like the limelight on me. And my Precious Truthz podcast page is just that, at Precious Truthz. You can find me on all platforms for podcasts. That's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. I'm everywhere. And if you do like to read, you know, not to say people don't like to read, but if you do like to read, you also can go to my blog. That's precioustruthz.blogspot.com. Just tune in. I have so much more coming for you guys. And I'm creating my own website right now. So my podcast and my blog can be in one place, and it'll be mine. That'll be precioustruthz.com. It's under construction. You can visit if you want, but it's not fully completed yet. So, but I'm on all those platforms. Please tune in.
Awesome. Precious, we got to have you back on the show. You know,
I really enjoyed it.
You know, we got to have you back on here just to talk about some more truths that you unlearned along the way. We're excited to see everything that you come up with. You guys, please go follow her. We'll put all the information underneath the description box. So please go check her out. And y'all know the deal. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you for
tell your friends.
Tell your friends, your cousins,
your friends,
your grandmama.
Right. Come on.
Right?
We all need to learn
a gym.
It's never too old to learn a gym. It's never too old to learn a gym. Precious, again, thank you so much for blessing the pod. Thank you. We have to have you back on. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, guys.
Bye.